I just have a few more questions for you. When you testified, you said you moved down to North Carolina. You and Ms. Madonna purchased a house in Roseville.
Yes, ma'am.
And you said, you testified that you purchased that house with the proceeds from John Madonna's home when he sold it in New York.
Yes.
His father.
Yes, ma'am.
When you ultimately separated and sold that Roseville house, did you sell it or rent the Roseville house when you left?
We sold it.
And when you sold it, what happened to the proceeds of that house?
Some of it went to me and the rest went to Miss Madonna.
So you did get a portion of the proceeds from the
yes,
sale of that
ma'am.
home. Would you say it was about 50%?
No.
How much would you say you got?
80. Not 80%, but it was 220, I believe, for the sale of the house.
And you said that Isabel is getting some benefits through Champ VA.
Yes, ma'am.
And was she already getting those benefits when she came to live with you?
Not at first.
Was that something that, if you know, was she entitled to those benefits even when she was living with Jose?
As far as I know, I got in contact with them, and it was about a year later.
But do you know whether those would have been benefits that she could have gotten while living in the home with Joanna and Jose?
I
Or you
don't,
might not know.
No, I don't know.
And you mentioned on direct that you kind of try to stay out of Jose and Joanna's relationship. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Fair to say that you just didn't really want to be involved with any issues they may or may not be having?
Yes, ma'am.
On occasion, would Joanna try to tell you things about what was going on in the relationship?
No, ma'am.
She just knew not to express a lot of those things to you?
No, I wouldn't ask or anything.
You just felt that wasn't your business?
Yes, ma'am.
Around this time, 2013, June, how much did Isabel weigh?
She probably weighed, could have been 100 pounds, maybe.
Not to be disrespectful, but she's a little heavier, correct, for her age?
Yes, ma'am.
And at the time, was Joanna able to lift her?
Probably not. She was pretty heavy. It's hard for me to lift her sometimes, so.
So if Joanna even tried, she would have difficulty lifting Isabel.
Objection, Your Honor.
Go on.
She would have difficulty lifting Isabel if she tried to.
Yes, ma'am.
Even outside of the weight, Isabel weighing approximately 100 pounds, if you know it all, would her fibromyalgia have prevented her from lifting Isabel?
Objection, Your Honor.
Okay.
As far as you were aware, she had difficulty lifting Isabel, correct?
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Did you ever witness the defendant try and lift Isabel?
Not that I can recall.
Most of y'all's interactions in the last few years that occurred in a parking lot, is that fair to say?
Yes.
In terms of transferring over Isabel so she could spend time with you? At some point, I believe you testified on cross-examination about, again, just getting at the word womanizing. Is what you're really referring to making sexist remarks or saying things that Joanna might find offensive?
Yeah, some kind of joke.
There wasn't ever any, you never involved in any kind of extramarital relationships with anybody, correct?
No, ma'am.
And, you know, at some point you separated out your bank account because of the overdrafts that were occurring, and it was thereafter that she asked you to move out and y'all separated.
That was towards the end of 2008.
And so she then initiated the separation, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And it was a week after that, or no more than a week after that, that Jose moved into the house?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Pritchard. I have nothing further.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You can stand down.
Thank you.
Any objection with him being released from his subpoena?
No, Your Honor.
Any objection on behalf of the defendant?
No, Your Honor.
For the evidence for the state?
Your Honor, the state would call K.A. Battle.
I do.
Finish with you.
Would you state your full name for the court, please?
Karen Battle.
And Ms. Battle, how are you employed?
I am a sergeant with the Wake County Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you been with the Wake County Sheriff's Office?
19 years.
And during the 19 years, have you had different duties?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
And most recently as a sergeant, what are your duties?
Supervise the Northeast Property Crimes Unit in the Criminal Investigations Division.
And where is the Northeast unit?
That would include North Raleigh, Roseville, Wendell, Knightdale, Zebulon, Wake Forest.
And as a supervisor, what is it that you do?
I currently supervise 10 investigators in the unit. We're primarily responsible for pawn shop investigations, property investigations, break-ins, car break-ins, anything involving property.
Now, were you involved in any way on the 16th of June 2013 in the crime scene, or responding to the crime scene where Mr. Jose Perez's body was found?
Yes, ma'am.
And how did you know to go there? Did you get some kind of dispatch?
I was the on-call supervisor for that day. I received a phone call from a supervisor on patrol, and he advised me of the call.
And what time were you advised?
I was notified at 6:15 in the morning.
And did you go immediately then to the crime scene?
Yes, I did.
And approximately what time was it when you got there?
I arrived at 10 after 7.
When you got there, were there a number of sheriff's deputies already on the scene?
There were a few present, yes.
And was CCBI already there when you got there?
I don't believe so. No, ma'am, they were not.
When you got, and the place that we're talking about is where?
It's off Highway 98 in the Wake Forest area.
And specifically on what road was the body found?
It was on Old Bayleaf Road.
And can you describe what you saw when you got there?
Yes, ma'am. Old Bayleaf Road is a side road off Highway 98. When I first arrived on the scene, there were a few patrol deputies there, and there was crime scene tape around the deceased. I immediately noticed a male subject lying, it appeared to be a ditch area, probably about 5 to 10 feet off the roadway.
And did you go with inside the crime scene tape to get close to the body?
Yes, ma'am, I did at 7:16,
Why did you do that?
just to make an initial observation.
And what were your initial observations?
I noticed a male subject lying in the ditch area. He appeared to have been stabbed a few times on his back. He was lying in a pool of blood or some blood. I noticed that his face was not visible because a T-shirt was covering his head. I also observed a pair of tennis shoes lying nearby in the wood line near him.
Were you involved in any way in getting additional personnel to the area, for instance, a K-9 unit and other officers to search in the area around the body?
I did not, no ma'am.
Were you aware that those things were happening?
I left the scene shortly after that, so I cannot testify to what actions took place after I left.
You didn't really do anything except come and see where the body was and that it appeared to be a homicide?
Correct.
And then left?
The only additional thing I did was I contacted the medical examiner's office just to advise them of what we had, that we would be having an investigation. I spoke with Dr. Fox, and he agreed to take the deceased once we were finished. And then I contacted communications and requested CCBI, and they arrived a short time later. Other than that particular date, I had no further role in the investigation.
Is the next time that you had anything to do with the investigation on the Monday following, that is June 17th?
Yes, ma'am.
And on June 17th, were you asked to do something in particular?
Yes, I was.
What were you asked to do?
I executed a search warrant on Miss Madonna inside the Hammond Road Jail
And what was the purpose of the search warrant that you executed?
to collect DNA samples from her body to compare with those at the scene.
And is that something that you personally did, or was that done by a nurse?
It was conducted by nurse and Agent Thompson with CCBI. Did it collectively. I was just present because I had executed the search warrant.
And when you say execute a search warrant, what do you mean? What do you
Well,
do?
as a law enforcement officer, we had to apply for the search warrant. But since I'm not a nurse, I would not be the one that would collect the blood sample. So CCBI, the nurse inside the jail, Nurse Mingio, did a blood sample to collect DNA. And then Agent Thompson with CCBI did DNA swabs on her cheeks. We had collected a hair sample, took photographs of her injuries.
And again, I want to go back to execute a search warrant isn't a term that most people know would understand what that is. What does it mean to execute the search warrant? After you've gotten it, what do you have to do?
We arrived at the jail that day, and they got Miss Madonna for us. We took her to a private room, and at that point, we physically started taking the DNA samples from her.
Did you read her the search warrant before you did it?
Yes, and we left a copy.
And did you inform her of why you were there?
Yes,
And was she cooperative with you?
she was.
Tell us what, during the course of the samples that,
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll excuse you to the jury for just a few moments while you're there. Don't discuss this case among yourselves, neither should you form or express any opinion about any issue in this trial during this time. If that's your excuse. You may get her to answer so we'll know what we're shooting at.
Sergeant Battle, what did the defendant ask you?
She inquired as to whether or not she had an attorney yet.
And what did you tell her?
I told her that I was unaware if she had an attorney. I did inform her that I believed her first appearance would have been later that afternoon, and that at that time she could ask for an attorney, or she probably could have been appointed one.
And did she ask you anything about whether she was going to be photographed?
She did.
What did she say?
She asked if we would take photographs of her injuries, and I replied yes.
Did she also ask you what she was being charged with?
She did.
And what did you tell her?
I told her at that time that she was being charged in connection with her husband's death.
Did she say anything to that?
She said okay.
And while she was being photographed by Agent Thompson Louder, did Miss Madonna ask you any other questions?
She did.
What did she ask you?
She inquired as to whether or not the jail would serve her coffee with her lunch.
And what did you tell her?
I told her that I didn't know, but that she could ask.
That it?
I don't have any questions, Your Honor. I don't believe any of those statements would be relevant. She does have the right to an attorney. I mean, especially I was anticipating a statement about coffee is not relevant or germane to anything in this trial, so we'd ask that that be suppressed.
Yes, ma'am.
I think that there are a lot of things that are relevant, that not necessarily from the words that are spoken, but for some other reason. And I would suggest that all of these questions by the defendant are relevant in the state's case. And if the court thinks it's inappropriate to have any question at all asked about the attorney, I don't mind not asking that.
Well, I'll sustain the objection as to whether she had an attorney yet and anything about a first appearance. The rest of it I'll allow in. I don't think it's fine. It's her questions. You can bring the jury in.
say anything about the attorney?
The attorney,
Not the attorney and not the first appearance.
no attorney.
Okay.
Witness with the state.
Sergeant Battle, you said that you did have some conversation with the defendant while the samples were being taken from her. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Did she ask you anything about being photographed?
She did.
What did she ask you?
She asked me if photographs of her injuries would be taken.
And what did you tell her?
I replied yes.
Did she point out areas that she thought were important to have photographed?
She did.
And were those things photographed?
They were.
Did she at some point ask you what she was being charged with?
She did.
What did you tell her?
I told her that she was being charged in connection with her husband's death.
What did she say?
She said okay.
Was there, after she was photographed and had the pin prick on her finger and the swabs and everything were done, did she ask you anything else?
Objection for the record, Your Honor.
Noted for the record. Make the
She
Did
did.
she ask you anything else?
She did.
What did she ask you?
She asked me whether or not she could get coffee with her lunch in jail.
What was her affect like? I mean, her behavior. How was she relating to you and Agent Thompson and the nurse?
She appeared very talkative. She appeared to be in a good mood.
I have no other questions.
witness with the defendant.
Ms. Battle, this is the first time you had ever met Madonna a day in your life, correct?
Correct.
And it's kind of hard. You didn't know anything about her prior dispositions or how she typically is or anything like that, correct?
No, sir, I didn't.
You also didn't know anything about any illness or ailments that she may have that caffeine would help, do you?
No, sir.
No further questions. Thank you.
Been read. For the state.
Your Honor, the state would call John Chadwick Richardson, please. Mr. Richardson, if you would please state your name for the court.
John Chadwick Richardson.
Okay. And Mr. Richardson, let's start a little bit about you telling us about yourself. How are you currently employed?
Currently work with Alliance Behavioral Health Care as a mental health substance abuse care coordinator. So I connect people with services.
Right. And you feel free to move that microphone wherever you need to for it to be comfortable for you, and we'll let you know if we can't hear you.
Okay.
How long have you worked as a mental health provider or therapist?
Since 2000.
And where did you do your education?
I got a master's in education at NC State in counseling.
Okay, and prior to going to NC State and getting a master's of education in counseling, where did you go to school?
Went to East Carolina, 4-year degree in psychology.
Prior to becoming a counselor, what type of work were you involved in?
I worked with Wake County Human Services probably since I got out of college. I did work with Medicaid, child support, child protective services, and then worked at a treatment center.
And what year did you finish college?
89.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about, was most of your time with Wake County spent with child protective services? Was that where you spent most of your time? Or?
No, 2.5 years.
Okay. And when were those years?
That would have been, I think, the middle of 97 until 2000.
Okay, so basically you're working for Child Protective Services and then went to get your degree to be a therapist and became
Right.
a therapist, is that right?
Right.
As a Child Protective Services, what did you do for them?
I was an investigator, or basically we got the reports of abuse and neglect, and I was one of the first ones to go out, talk to the children or the families, and see if there had been neglect or abuse.
Okay. Once you received your master's in counseling, what did you do, or where was your first employment?
I was at the Wake County Alcohol Treatment Center. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was over on Falstaff Road. I was a family counselor there for inpatient and outpatient.
And were you meeting with families during that time, doing
Meeting
group
with-
therapy or one-on-one therapy, or?
It was a little bit of both. Some, one-on-one with the patients while they were there, and then we would bring in wives or family members. Not a whole lot with children there.
At some point, did you go through yourself alcohol recovery?
Yes.
Okay. And when did you first become aligned with Alliance Behavioral Health or start to work with them?
That was April of 2014.
And in that capacity, tell us a little bit about what you were doing.
I'm a care coordinator, which means I don't do direct counseling, but I connect people who have Medicaid or no insurance. I connect them to community providers and follow up and make sure they're getting treatment. A lot of folks coming out of hospitals and treatment centers.
And do you continue to be a licensed therapist?
I am.
And so between the time that you worked for the Wake Alcohol Treatment Center and became a care coordinator for Alliance Behavioral Health, did you see patients individually?
Yes. Worked at Carolina Partners in mental health care as a therapist.
And tell us a little bit about what your responsibilities or your duties were there.
I was a mental health, basically a counselor, therapist, and would see individuals, couples, some families for just general mental health issues.
Was it in that capacity that you first met the defendant, Mrs. Madonna?
Yes.
And tell us about that.
She came in, the first appointment was March of 2013.
And how many times did you see Miss Madonna in that setting?
4 times.
Okay. And were those just for general therapy sessions?
Yes.
Okay. At some point, did you and Miss Madonna begin to have some conversations or interactions outside of those therapy sessions?
Yes.
And can you tell us about that? How did that come about?
During therapy, it came out that she was singing in a band. I play bass, and so after therapy terminated, not long after it terminated, she asked if I wanted to sit in. Their bass player couldn't make it one night and play and make some money, play a gig, and so I did.
And so did she contact you about doing that?
Pretty sure it was through like Facebook.
And so did you go play that gig?
I did.
And where was that, if you remember?
I don't remember the name of the place. It was in Wake Forest, like a sports bar. That's the only time I've been there, so I'm not sure what it was called, but
And would that have been in late April or early May of 2013?
it would have been, yeah, it's at least in May. I don't know if it was May or June. I don't remember.
Right. And tell us about that evening. What happened?
We played the gig. You know, I got together with the band one time the night before practice. We played the gig.
Where was that practice?
That was in some studios off of Falls of the Noose. I don't know the name of those either, but and then we just played, and I, made my cut. And
Then when you went for that practice, was the defendant, Miss Madonna, there?
yes,
And was her husband there with her?
yes,
Okay. And when you went the next night to play in the band, was she there?
yes,
And was her husband in the audience there as well?
yep.
Okay. How many members of the band were there?
Let's see, 2 guitar, me, drummer, and her, so 5.
At the point in time when you went to play in the band, were you married?
Separated, but separated 5 months. But
So you'd been separated 5 months. How long had you been married before you separated?
a little over 6 years.
And did you have any children, or do you have any children?
I do, not by that wife, but yeah,
Okay. And so you've been married another time as well?
2 times.
Okay. Tell us, and you have 2 daughters, is that correct?
Right.
Okay. So at the time that you went and played in the band, you had been separated for about 5 months. Did you and Miss Madonna have occasion after that to interact or come in contact with each other?
Yes.
And tell us how that came about.
I guess we stayed in touch. I can't remember if it was the day after the gig, but just friendly texting, and then we ended up like getting together for lunch.
And had Shaw exchanged numbers as part of planning the
Yes.
gig in order for you to participate and play in the band?
Right.
And after the band and y'all began to exchange texts and things, where did you said you got together for lunch? How did that come about?
She came, I think this was the first time she came, picked me up near my office in Raleigh. We went, I remember going to the farmer's market, walked around, just talked. That was the first time.
Okay, and so were there times after that that y'all got together?
I'm thinking 4 or 5 times is what I'm guessing, estimating.
And so were a couple more of those maybe for lunch? Did
Yeah,
you
we
have
got
other
together.
lunch dates or?
We didn't actually eat lunch together, I don't think, but we spent like my lunch hour, we'd talk or sit in the car.
Okay. At some point, did she come to your house?
She did.
And when was that?
I don't remember the date, but sometime between May and June, or it could have been the first part of June, I'm not sure.
Okay. And so maybe within a week or two of you having played in the band, or within a few weeks of you having played in the band.
Right.
And in fact, y'all started to interact or talk pretty frequently and see each other with some regularity in that several week period. Is that?
Yeah, I would say we mostly texted and got together a few times.
At some point, did the relationship or your interactions take on a flirtatious tone?
I would agree with flirtatious, yeah.
And tell us a little bit about that. Who initiated a romantic involvement?
I'm not sure that I would call it a romantic involvement, but I'm not sure who initiated. I don't know. Just became friendly and then some flirting back and forth.
Okay, and at one point y'all kissed, is that
One time, yeah.
accurate? Okay. And she had come, and one day y'all spent the day in Smithfield driving around,
Right.
right? And on June 16th of 2013, y'all had made some plans to try to get together. Is that true for that Sunday night, the 17th?
To get together that day.
Okay,
Sunday.
tell me about that.
She had actually asked me to come to her house that Sunday, and I declined to come to her house. And then we decided she could come to my house.
And what was the purpose of her coming to your house?
Really just to hang out. As far as I knew, her husband had left the night before, and they were separated, and she was just going to come and talk. And that's the one reason I didn't want to go to her house, because that had just happened, and I didn't know if he was still around or what.
And did y'all, in addition to starting to spend time together and exchanging flirtatious texts and having exchanged that kiss, did y'all start to talk about things that you would want to do together in the future and trips that you wanted to take?
Some talk about that, yeah.
And did she talk to you about, finances and money to do that?
Right.
And what would she tell you?
That she had the money to do that. I didn't have to worry about money.
The day you went to Smithfield, tell me a little bit about that. Why did you go to Smithfield together?
Really, it was a nice day, nice weather, just to get out, and that's where I grew up. So we just decided to ride to Smithfield and drive around the town. I hadn't been there in a while.
And how many hours did y'all spend together that day?
I don't know for sure. I'm guessing around 4, maybe.
And so all of these things had occurred in the weeks leading up to the weekend of June 14th, 15th, 16th.
Right.
Is that right? Okay. And did you have your daughters that weekend?
I don't believe so.
When do you normally have your daughters?
Well, every other weekend, but actually I don't really remember. I'm pretty sure I didn't have them. I know I didn't have them the Sunday that she came over, so I'm guessing I didn't have them that weekend. But it can fluctuate. I mean, it has changed over the years, but it's every other weekend.
Okay. So if there were texts exchanged where you talked about having your daughters that weekend, that would be a possibility, is that right?
Yeah, if there were texts
And
exchanged.
typically they go home on Sunday, is that
right.
kind of
Most
the way the
yeah.
system works? And
Yeah.
so on the 16th, or on the 15th of June, which was a Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember hearing from Miss Madonna on that day, the defendant?
Yes.
And what do you remember about that?
I know there was some text. One of her texts said it is almost done, or what I was under the impression that she was separating from her husband or asking him to leave. And,
Did she tell you she was going to South Carolina that day?
I don't remember if it was that day, but she did tell me she was going to South Carolina
Okay.
somewhere around that time.
Okay. And you were under the understanding that she was going to be telling her husband that they were going to separate.
Right.
Is that right? And at some point on that day, did you hear from Miss Madonna? Did y'all make plans? Y'all made plans, didn't you, to get together that next night?
Yes, we did. I guess it was that day.
Okay. And you had made plans, in fact, for her to come over to your house that next evening.
I believe it was maybe more afternoon, but yeah.
And at some point, you received a text from Miss Madonna on Saturday night. Is that right?
Right.
And you mentioned just a moment ago, what was it you remember the text saying?
I remember one text saying it's almost done, and then I remember one text saying it got ugly.
And what did you think that she was talking about at that time?
I thought she was talking about that they probably had an argument, maybe even a fight. She had told me when she tried to ask him to leave before, he would threaten suicide and things like that. So I just figured it got kind of ugly in that way.
And so did you have any other communication with her on that evening, Saturday the 16th?
Not that I remember.
And so on Sunday, the 17th, did the defendant in fact come to your house?
She did.
Okay. And what time was it, if you remember, that she came? Was it in the evening?
I'm not real clear. It was
Well, if
maybe,
you'd had your daughters that day.
it would have been late afternoon,
Okay.
probably, at least.
And what, if anything, do you remember about the defendant telling you that evening?
She told me things got rough or ugly. I don't remember the words.
Did she tell you where the victim was, where Mr. Perez was?
She said he had gone to Florida. Somebody had picked him up and taken him to Florida, where his
Did she
family
give
lived.
you any indication when she said it had gotten ugly, what she meant by that?
She showed me her arms, said that he had cut her with a knife, and she showed me her arms, the inside of her arms.
And tell us what you observed in looking at her arms.
They were scratched.
And, you know, when you say scratched, did it appear to you to be a knife cut?
No.
What did it appear to you to be?
More like a person's fingernails or something scratching. The skin was not broken. There were not clear cuts or evidence that it had been bleeding.
And what was your thought about that when she...
I thought it was odd. The first thing I asked her when she said that is, I asked her, did she call the police when that happened, if he had a knife, you know, after her? And she said no, she didn't want to get them involved. So.
As part of your work as a therapist, have you had occasion to deal with patients who might be involved in what's known as cutting?
Yes.
And for those who might not know, what is cutting?
Objection to the relevance, Your Honor.
Overall, go on.
Cutting is when well, there's different types, but cutting is usually when a person is cutting themselves with a razor blade or a sharp object. You know, if it's not an actual suicide attempt, then it's more usually because of anxiety or trying to relieve stress or
And so, as part of your training, have you had training or opportunity to kind of look at different types of cuts and to determine what they might be caused by?
yes, especially with the Child Protective Services.
Tell me a little bit about that. You mentioned that earlier, that you worked as an investigator for Child Protective Services.
Well, part of our training was identifying different marks, bruises, you know, telling how old they are, how severe they are, cuts. We watched videos and studied different injuries, so we would know what to look for.
And so on the night when you saw the defendant, the injuries that you saw appeared to you to be more like scratches?
Right.
Okay. Did you and the defendant talk much about her marriage to the victim?
Some.
And did she indicate to you that she had married him thinking that he had cancer?
I don't remember that.
Okay. Do you remember giving a statement in this case shortly after the defendant was arrested?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And do you remember that statement was given right next door here at the Public Safety Center?
I do.
Okay. And were you asked to come down there to give a statement?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And did you go voluntarily to give a statement?
I did.
And at any point, were you under arrest or placed in handcuffs or
No.
forced to cooperate with giving a statement?
No.
No. You were simply there to tell what you might know about the situation. Is that right?
Right.
And with that statement, if I was to say to you that that statement was given on June 26th, about 10 days after the death of the victim, is that sound?
Yeah, I wouldn't dispute that.
Okay. And is it likely that, given the fact that that was right after this had occurred, that maybe your memory about things at that point may have been better?
I would hope so.
And so if you told Detective Gay at that time that you remember the defendant telling you that she had married Jose because he had cancer and would be dying soon, do you think that
Objection,
would...
Your Honor, that's not what the statement says.
Overruled, go on.
Would that, whatever you told Investigator Gay on that day, would you believe that to have been accurate
Yes,
to the best of your memory?
yes.
Okay. Do you remember also telling Investigator Gay or that during one conversation the defendant had told you that she...
Objection to the hearsay, Your Honor.
This is the, repeat your question.
Do you remember telling Investigator Gay that the defendant had told you that she had had sex with the victim as an obligation and that she had never enjoyed it?
Overruled for the reason stated.
Yes.
And you and, I think we've talked about this, but you and the victim had really started talking about having a relationship yourself, right, once. Had you indicated to her that you wanted to wait until she had ended her relationship with Jose?
I'm pretty sure.
You indicated earlier that you had met the victim on 2 occasions at the band practice and then also at the band performance. At the band practice, what did you observe about him, or what is your recollection about him?
Nothing really stands out. I mean, he was hanging out there. He appeared to be an older gentleman, but I didn't really interact. I didn't really talk to him or interact with him.
And so in regards to, for example, where the band was playing, was he kind of sitting away from where y'all were playing?
We were in a room, one room, practice room, so I can't remember if he walked in and out or if he stayed in the whole time, to be honest with you.
Okay. And were there other people with him, or other friends of the defendant, if you remember, or other fans of the band at the performance?
At the performance or the practice?
At the performance.
There were.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that the defendant had initiated or had started seeing you prior to y'all having some relationship outside of your
Right.
therapy sessions, and that you only saw her 4 times. Is that right?
That's right.
Was a decision made at the end of the 4 times by Ms. Madonna that she really didn't need to continue therapy?
I remember discussing that. Yes.
What do you remember about that, Mr. Richardson?
I remember basically, I don't know the exact words that were used, but that we decided to end the therapy at that point.
Okay. As a licensed therapist, have you had to make a self-report about the fact that this relationship subsequently began to you having been a counselor for Ms. Madonna?
Yes,
And have you done that?
I have.
And so has this whole situation placed you in a difficult position?
Absolutely.
And so does it make it, something that may be difficult to talk about?
Yep.
If I could have one moment,
Yes, ma'am.
please. Our interview with the investigator Brian Gay, at that time, did they ask you to, did y'all begin to talk about some of the texts that you had exchanged?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And do you remember them asking if they could actually look at your phone to try and write down some of that information?
Yes.
Okay. And at some point, did they just ask you if they could download your phone? And did you allow them to do that?
Yes.
And was that done voluntarily?
Oh, yes.
Were there texts on that phone between the defendant and you that you had saved
Yes.
or that were still there? Further questions at this time?
Witness with the defendant.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Richardson.
Afternoon.
You were working for Carolina Partners whenever you met Miss Madonna.
Yes, sir.
How did people get to your practice? And not physically, but how did they get connected with you?
Different referral sources, mostly probably insurance refers people.
Okay. Did you work in a group of other therapists, or was it just you?
Yes, it's a partnership of therapists and doctors.
So when a person, like say they're being referred to Carolina Partners, does someone at Carolina Partners say, okay, you're going to Mr. Richardson, you're going to so-and-so, you're going to whoever in the office?
Yes.
Miss Madonna has no way to determine who she's going to see and did not ask for you specifically, did she?
Right.
And what was your first meeting with Miss Madonna?
The date?
Yes, the date, if you remember, the month would suffice.
Yeah, I wrote it down, March 2013.
All right, so you met her in March 2013 for the first time.
Yes.
And how do initial meetings go? What do you initially do whenever you're talking to someone about their therapy?
We do basically like an initial assessment or asking background questions like social and family and kind of why they're there and what they want to work on.
Okay. And you talk to them about their family situation and the people in their house?
Yes.
And you talk to them about stressors in their life and things that are affecting them, affecting their, I guess, mental and physical health?
Yes, sir.
And Miss Madonna told you about fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue.
Right.
And she talked to you about having IBS and things like that. And other, I guess, hydrothyroid. Do you remember anything about that?
It's possible. I don't know.
Okay. And do you diagnose her or give her any kind of diagnosis during your initial interview with her?
We would give a mental health diagnosis.
And what was your mental health diagnosis for Miss Madonna, if you can recall?
Major depression, recurrent, moderate, and then alcohol dependence, but that was in full sustained remission.
And you put alcohol dependence because alcohol addiction is a lifelong thing. You don't really get rid of it. But you mark down there that she had been successful in fighting that for a good period of time.
Right.
And then people also write down other things like neck pain, hip pain, back pain, fatigue, sweats, things like that. You give them a chart to kind of fill out so you can figure out how to best treat them, correct?
Yes, sir.
And those were kind of ailments that Miss Madonna was suffering through at that point in time, correct?
I believe so.
She also talked to you a lot about her autistic daughter, correct?
She did some, yes.
And severe autism, just talk some about that. Have you dealt with people dealing with issues with autism or children with autism before?
Some. I'm definitely not
a
expert
lot.
on that. No.
But in your experience, what are those people typically dealing with?
I mean, they tend to have a lot of kind of social, issues and problems relating to people, connecting with people. They tend to be more comfortable with a set routine.
And
that's general.
The extent of your experience with people with autism. And you can understand if a child has these issues, is being kicked out of school and fighting at school, where that would cause stress upon a person with other diseases.
Sure.
Do you have any experience with fibromyalgia and how it affects a person?
Not much.
Okay. Because that may go to a little more medical doctor and you're doing therapy sessions and things like that. But it can affect a person's mental health, being tired all the time, fatigued all the time, having children with problems and all that, correct?
Yes.
The Miss Madonna did talk to you some about her growing up and how she was raised and her family situation when she was growing up, correct?
Yes.
She told you that she slept a lot and rested and was wiped out after she went to work, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
As a part of your treatment with Miss Madonna, she talks about her kids and talks about what her kids are doing and where they're in school and how they're performing and things like that, correct?
Yes, sir.
And all of that is a part of, I guess, getting the totality of her circumstances so you can best know how to treat her, correct?
Right.
And dealing with that, she also would talk about Jose some, correct?
Right.
And she did talk to you about Jose and that he had some trust issues in their relationship.
I'm not sure about that. I could.
Okay. Do you have any notes up there that would let you know if you had any trust issues in their relationship?
She had told me, this is when she first came in, that she was in an unsatisfactory marriage.
Did she say anything about Jose being jealous and confrontational and things like that?
Jealous, controlling, and negative.
Did she say that she believed Jose was a former retired assistant district attorney?
Mm-hmm.
And she told you that Jose would tell her a lot of lies.
Yes.
She even talked some about her stepson, who was Jose's son, correct? Mm. And Jose's son had his own personal health issues and ended up passing away. And obviously that was traumatic for her when Jose's son, correct? Mm. And Jose's son had his own personal health issues and ended up passing away. And obviously that was traumatic for her whenever she came and talked to you about that, correct?
Right. Yeah.
So after these 4 meetings, were you guys already talking about the band and her playing music and things like that?
We had, it had come up in, I don't know which session, but we had talked about it, yes.
And you remember saying that you possibly wanted to end the therapy relationship so you could have a relationship with her in regards to playing in her band?
I remember saying that I could not do that if she was still seeing me for therapy.
And even, and you're more familiar with the therapy guidelines than I am, but even if she just stopped seeing you as a therapist, it's still not appropriate for you to immediately start hanging out with her after therapy, is it?
Right. That was a big mistake.
When Miss Madonna had told you prior to any of this taking place that she was going to ask Jose to leave, correct?
Right.
Do you remember how long before the actual incident itself that she had told you about she was going to ask Jose to leave?
I know even the first session she mentioned that, let's see. That I wrote that she feels a loss of self-respect for staying with him. Let me see if. let's see, on May 1st, 2013, she was talking about there was a family tragedy, and that how that event has highlighted her dissatisfaction with her marriage. And she is considering asking her husband to leave, but is not strong enough currently due to her grief. That's what I wrote.
So because she was going through that, and I believe that was Jose's son, that she wasn't in a position to talk to Jose about leaving at that point in time, correct?
I had written that a friend's ex-sister-in-law killed her husband, one child, and herself. So,
Okay. So
that
some
was-
other traumatic event that she wasn't able to deal with. And what date was that?
That was May 1st.
In May 1st of
Yes, sir.
2013. And Ms. Madonna had talked to you about that she had asked Jose before, I think you were talking to the district attorney, as she asked him before about separating. And then when she would do that, he would threaten suicide.
She did say that, yeah.
And your, I guess, professional experience and through your therapy and your learning, threatening suicide or making idle threats at suicide is a form of controlling someone, is it not?
Right.
Because if you're threatening someone with suicide and making them stay, that makes them stay, correct?
It can, yeah.
It can make them stay.
Can, yes.
And she had done that before, and he had threatened it, and that's why she was reluctant to talk to him about separation again.
Yes, she said that.
So starting out, your relationship was a strictly professional one, correct?
Right.
And you're working with her as her social worker and her therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you guys start figuring out about the music thing, that's when things went in a different direction.
Right.
How long were you, excuse me, you said you had met with her 4 times. When did you start exchanging text messages?
I'm thinking, let's see. So the last time was May 22nd, 2013. That was our last session. I don't know, I can't remember how long between that and the band performance, but we texted in relation to that.
So you had never texted before that last meeting with her?
No.
And you had never had you guys hung out or had these lunch outings or whatever before that last meeting with her?
No.
So all of this stuff is happening in a period of time between May 22nd and June 25th, or excuse me, June the 15th.
Yes.
You had mentioned to Ms. Freeman that you had kissed her one time.
Mm-hmm.
When was that?
I don't remember the date. It was at my house.
Okay. Was it at your house on the day after this incident, that Sunday, or was it before, some period before
I
then?
think it was, if I'm not mistaken, she had been in my house 2 times, and it was the one before.
Okay. How many kisses did you share? What kind of kiss was it?
Just one, and it was not very,
Okay.
it was just like a peck, yeah.
A peck. But you knew that was inappropriate, correct?
Sure.
And you said to Ms. Freeman that she had put you in a bad position, but actually you're in control of that position, correct?
Right.
Because you're in the position of power, you're in a position of trust, you're in a position of authority over Ms. Madonna, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
When I was her therapist, yes.
And that's why we have these guidelines, because of that relationship.
Right.
She's supposed to be able to trust you with everything and feel completely open to you, and you took advantage of that, correct?
You can say that.
Would you say that?
I'd say I made a mistake, definitely.
Because she's telling you about her dissatisfaction with her marriage, and she's telling you that she's thinking about asking her husband to leave, and you have all these, I guess, intimate details about her life that typically wouldn't be disclosed
Right.
to anyone else, especially in that period of time.
Correct.
So on the Saturday of the incident, you guys are shooting text messages back and forth,
Yes, sir.
and she was even talking then that this was the day I'm going to ask Jose to leave this day,
Right.
and she had said he had left on foot, and then it had gotten ugly.
Right.
And had she told you that actual day that she was going to, that was the day, like this is the day that I'm going to do it?
I'm pretty sure, yes.
And you said good luck to her, correct?
Probably. Yeah.
And when you think you talked to Detective Gay about this, whenever you guys are discussing her breaking up or separating from Jose, you even tell her, whoa, 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 don't break up because of me. Don't break up because of these text messages that we're shooting back and forth, correct?
I may have. I don't remember saying that, but
You may not have said it that way, but you said,
Yes.
Don't
Right.
let me be the reason that you separate from Jose.
right,
And she said that you weren't the reason that she was separating from Jose.
right.
And she was telling other people that she was planning on separating from Jose as well, correct? You remember her talking to you about that and telling people at AA that she was going to be separating from Jose?
I'm not sure. I don't remember, but
Do you remember having a conversation with her where she said, I think these other people are interested?
oh, yes, okay.
You remember that conversation now?
Mm-hmm.
And you remember telling her, well, make sure I have first dibs?
Something like that, yes.
Again, that was a abuse of the relationship that you guys had started in therapy, correct?
Right.
On the Sunday after the incident, you guys were texting and she had told you what happened and said that Jose, the separation that occurred, it had gotten ugly and asked you to come over the house.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't think that was appropriate because I guess in the totality of everything, nothing is appropriate about that, correct? In your relationship and the fact that she had, according to Miss Madonna at that point in time, said Jose had just left the house and she has her kids at the house and things like that, so you weren't trying to go
Right.
over her house.
Right.
But you did invite her over to your house.
Mm-hmm.
And then she ended up coming over your house at about 7 o'clock. Is that correct?
That may be.
And at that point in time, at about 9 o'clock that night, hold on one second. When she came over your house that night, did anything further progress in this relationship between you and Miss Madonna?
No, sir.
Did you kiss at all?
No.
And you're saying the only time that you guys have ever kissed is that one peck before?
Right.
And it never proceeded to any heavy petting or anything like that?
No.
Did you try to when she came over on that Sunday?
No. She got a call relatively soon after getting to my house from, I don't know if it was somebody at her house or it was a child that she needed to go there, that the police were there to talk to her.
Okay. So you were aware that that call that came in were the police calling from her house?
I didn't know who, if it was the police or her kids. Somebody called her and said,
Somebody
"You need to
called
come
from her
home."
house and she needed to go home, and then
Right.
she made her way home.
Yes.
Were you going to try to do anything with Miss Madonna that night?
Not that I
Can
remember.
recall?
Right.
And had Miss Madonna made any overtures towards you, towards getting physical that night?
No, I don't think so.
And you talked to Miss Freeman. She even asked you about you asking her with these scratch marks that you have, why didn't you call the police?
Mm-hmm.
And Miss Madonna said, I just wanted him gone. He's gone, and I'm satisfied with that.
Right.
when you were talking to Detective Gay, you came in and you were cooperative with everything, and you let him see your phone and all that stuff, correct?
Yes,
And I think you told him, quote, this has scared the shit out of you, correct?
yeah,
And it was scaring the shit out of you because, one, you're finding out that Mr. Perez was dead at that point, correct?
well, yeah, I was talking about when I saw it on the news Monday morning.
Okay. And did you text her that Monday morning in response to that? Do you remember?
I remember texting her Sunday night after she left, something to see if, is everything okay or something. I didn't get a response. I don't remember if I texted her that morning, but.
Okay. And it was scaring the shit out of you because of what happened, and also because you knew that you were in an inappropriate relationship and it could cause you to lose your license.
Well, yes, that's part of it.
And that's something you talked to the detectives about, that you were worried about this getting out or going to trial or being on TV or any of this stuff that's going on now.
Right.
And that still scares you at this point, I'm assuming.
Sure.
Have you given Miss Madonna any visits since that day? Mm-mm. Have you seen her since that day?
No, sir.
And you wouldn't hop right into a relationship with a woman that is accused of murdering her husband, would you?
No.
Nothing of that revved your engines up where this would be an appropriate thing to continue with, jump into a relationship with her?
No, sir.
And she had talked to you previously and multiple times about separating from her husband on that day?
On that Saturday.
On that Saturday. And she had talked to you previous to that Saturday about, this is the day that I'm going to do it.
Right.
Your Honor.
Ready to wrap?
Mr. Richardson, I assume in the course of your work you have occasion to refer people out to other people, is that correct? Other therapists, other treatment providers?
Yes.
And so at the end of 4 sessions with Miss Madonna, if you had begun initiated or y'all had started talking about playing in the band together and you felt like she needed ongoing therapy, you could have referred her to somebody else, is that right?
I could have, yeah.
And you didn't do that?
Right.
Okay, and so when she came in and talked to you about the things that she was having problems with, I believe on cross-examination you talked about she was having some concerns about her daughter who was autistic, and some concerns about health problems she was having, wanted to talk some about her childhood and some of the issues she was having as a result of that, the fact that she was in an unsatisfactory marriage and was ready to leave her husband. She never told you in any way that her husband had been verbally abusive to you or physically abusive to you in those 4 sessions, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And in terms of I think you indicated that you knew on Saturday the 15th that she intended to tell Mr. Perez that their marriage was going to be over, and that was your understanding of what she was going to do that night.
Right.
And that next night when she came to your house, she told you that he had gone to Florida, they had gotten in an argument, and that he had gone to Florida. Is that
Left on
right?
foot, went to Florida, yep.
You said on cross-examination that when you knew that she was going to be telling her husband on Saturday, the 15th, that their marriage was over, that you might have texted her something to the effect of good luck. Mm-hmm. You texted her, in fact, that you were looking forward to the next step in your soul adventure. Isn't that what you texted her?
If you have that there, yes.
Okay. She initiated, I assume, the discussions about the band and you coming to play with the band. Is that right?
Well,
I mean, certainly being in therapy with you being her therapist, who was it that told you that they needed a bass player in the band?
well, that was her for that.
Okay,
that
and she
one gig.
invited you or encouraged you to come play in that, didn't she?
Mm-hmm.
And then thereafter, it was when y'all started exchanging these texts and spending time together and engaging in that kiss. And
Right.
I believe at one point you said that, she was kind of encouraging that relationship. Is that true?
I would say so.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Richardson, you said encouraging the relationship, but like we already mentioned, you're the one in control of that relationship, correct? And you have the ethical duty to make sure that that relationship remained professional.
Right.
And you said you guys were having these lunches and taking these trips and just driving cars around and just riding along, but that was still your duty to make sure that it hadn't gotten there, correct?
Correct.
And it was your responsibility. When you're saying you're flirting and things are going back and forth, it would take two to do that, correct?
Right.
Because if she had tried to flirt with you and you took your stand, your professional stand, and say, hey, this ain't appropriate, then that would have been the end of it, correct?
I would think so, yeah.
And you mentioned this kiss, and she didn't try to initiate anything with you on that Sunday, correct?
Correct.
And Ms. Freeman said that he wasn't abusive, but she had told you that he was controlling and jealous, correct?
Right.
And we had talked about the controlling nature of threatening suicide when a person tells you they're going to leave.
Right.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Just one, Your Honor. Mr. Richardson, on Sunday, June 16th, 2013, the defendant texted you, I'm working on a babysitter for tonight. It just feels right, didn't she?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
No questions, Your Honor.
Thanks, sir. You can stand there. Requesting he be released from this opinion.
That's fine.
No objection, Your Honor.
So is, well, you got something short or you want to quit?
We don't have anyone that would be short.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess for this weekend. During the time that you're not with us, it is your duty not to talk among yourselves about this case. It's your duty not to talk to the parties, the witnesses, or the lawyers about anything at all. It's your further duty not to talk to anyone else, to allow anyone else to talk with you or to say anything in your presence about this case. If anyone communicates with you in any fashion or way, you need to let the sheriff know about it when you come in, any kind of information. Stay away from your computers as it has anything to do with this trial. Don't go on Facebook, any of those kind of things, and talk about this trial. Don't do any independent research, investigation on your own about any issue here. And do not form or express your opinion about any issue in this trial during this time. Told you you're going to get tired of that, but it's important. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'll excuse the 13 of you and ask that you return to the jury room Monday morning at 9:30. Leave your notes in your seat.